Walk into any pharmacy today, and you'll find an entire aisle dedicated to bone and muscle supplements, calcium tablets, magnesium capsules, protein powders, and every flavor imaginable. Billions of dollars of products claiming to fill nutritional gaps in the modern diet. But here's a question worth sitting with. For most of human history, there were no supplement aisles, there were no capsules, there were no powders in a tub. And yet people built functional, resilient bodies through labor-intensive lives, often into old age. Not because they were lucky, but because they ate grains that the modern food system has almost completely forgotten. Today, I'm going to take you through 15 of them, ancient cereal crops and pseudograins that fed entire civilizations. Grains studied by modern nutritional science for their mineral density, their protein quality, their anti-inflammatory compounds, and their potential contribution to skeletal and muscular health. Some of these you may have heard of, a few I'd bet you've never encountered in your life. Number 5 on this list is a grain that contains more calcium per gram than milk and has been a staple in traditional Indian agriculture for over 3,000 years. Number 11 is a seed so small it's barely visible. Stay with me through the whole list because the final entry is one of humanity's most important ancient crops, and it may be the most resilient food plant on Earth. If this kind of content is useful to you, subscribe right now and share this video with someone who cares about what they eat.
Number 1. Fonio. Fonio is a member of the millet family, a tiny seeded cereal grass native to the savannas of West Africa. The Dogon people of Mali have a name for it that translates roughly as seed of the universe. In their cosmology, the creator brought the universe into existence by exploding a single Fonio grain. That's how central this plant was to their understanding of existence. In practice, Fonio grows where other crops cannot. It thrives in poor, sandy soils under dry conditions, matures in as little as 6 to 8 weeks, and historically served as a critical food source during famine periods when other crops had failed. In Senegal, Burkina Faso, and Mali, it was traditionally reserved for chiefs and celebratory meals, a grain of such value it was set apart for special occasions. Nutritionally, Fonio is naturally gluten-free and contains a noteworthy amino acid profile for a cereal. It is particularly rich in methionine and cysteine, sulfur-containing amino acids that are often limited in other grain-based diets. Methionine is one of the 9 essential amino acids your body cannot synthesize independently. The grain is about the size of a grain of sand. Fun fact, it cooks in roughly 5 minutes, faster than any other whole grain. In traditional preparation, it's steamed like couscous or cooked into porridge. Today, it's beginning to appear in specialty food stores globally as interest in heritage crops resurfaces. A grain this old deserves to be known.
Number 2. Job's tears, the pearl grain. If you've ever seen Job's tears, you've likely mistaken the seeds for beads. They're hard, rounded, and naturally lustrous, and they have been used as decorative beads in jewelry across Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa for centuries, alongside their culinary role. The plant is striking, tall, broad-leafed, with seeds that hang in clusters and look more ornamental than agricultural. But Job's tears is one of the oldest cultivated grains in Asia. In traditional Chinese medicine, the grain is called yi yi ren and appears in classical texts dating to the Han Dynasty, where it was prescribed for conditions affecting joints, digestion, and overall vitality. Scientifically, Job's tears contains meaningful amounts of dietary fiber, plant-based protein, and iron. It is gluten-free and has a naturally low glycemic index compared to refined grains. What makes Job's tears interesting is its adaptability. It tolerates wet, swampy conditions that would destroy most other cereals, making it a historically important food in waterlogged regions where alternative crops were impractical. It can be cooked as a whole grain, ground into flour, or brewed into a traditional tea. Its slightly chewy texture and mild, earthy flavor make it a satisfying base for porridges and grain bowls. It is worth knowing for its history alone. That it also delivers solid whole grain nutrition is a bonus.
3. Proso Millet, the drought survivor. Here is a cereal that has fed people across Asia and Europe for approximately 10,000 years, longer than wheat has been farmed across most of the world. In China, Proso Millet porridge predates rice as a primary food crop. What defined Proso Millet throughout history was not some exceptional nutritional profile, it was its agricultural character. Proso Millet requires the least water of any cereal crop. It reaches maturity in 60 to 75 days. It produces grain under heat and drought conditions that would destroy maize, wheat, or rice. They grew it because it grew when nothing else would. Proso millet is a meaningful source of complex carbohydrates, dietary fiber, and B vitamins, particularly niacin and B6. It provides phosphorus, magnesium, and manganese. Phosphorus is one of the major structural minerals in bone. Roughly 85% of the body's phosphorus is stored in the skeletal system. Magnesium is involved in over 300 enzymatic reactions, including those related to bone mineral density maintenance. Proso millet is naturally gluten-free, which has generated renewed interest in it as a cooking grain. Prepare it like couscous, steep in boiling water and fluff with a fork. It has a mild, slightly nutty flavor that absorbs seasoning well and works as a base for savory grain bowls, soups, or fermented porridges in the traditional style. This grain built civilizations across 2 continents. It is asking to be rediscovered.
4. Barnyard Millet. What people ate when everything else failed. This one has a humbling history. Barnyard millet is one of the fastest maturing food crops in existence. Under the right conditions, it can go from seed to harvest in 45 days. In traditional agricultural systems across South Asia and East Asia, this made it an emergency food. The crop you planted when floods, drought, or conflict had destroyed the primary harvest, and you had 6 weeks before starvation became a real possibility. It was also consumed as a fasting food in Hindu tradition across India, where it is known as sama or vrat ki chawal, fasting rice, because of its neutral flavor profile and easy digestibility. Barnyard millet is notably high in dietary fiber, among the highest of any millet variety, and contains meaningful iron, calcium, and phosphorus. Its fiber content contributes to slower glucose absorption, which is associated in the research literature with more stable energy levels and lower inflammatory burden over time. Chronic low-grade inflammation is one of the factors associated with accelerated degradation of bone density in aging adults, so managing it through diet is a legitimate nutritional strategy. Barnyard millet has an exceptionally mild flavor, slightly similar to couscous. It cooks quickly, absorbs broths and spices well, and is used in traditional South Indian cooking in dishes like upma and pongal. If you're exploring the millet family for the first time, this is one of the most kitchen-friendly starting points.
Number 5. Finger millet, Ragi, the calcium champion. Finger millet, commonly called Ragi across South Asia, contains approximately 344 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams of grain. To put that in context, full-fat cow's milk contains approximately 120 milligrams per 100 milliliters. Finger millet, by these figures, contains roughly 3 times that of milk by weight. These are consistently reported figures across nutritional databases, including USDA data and peer-reviewed analyses published in journals. Ragi has been cultivated as a staple in Karnataka and other regions of South India for over 3,000 years. It was and remains a standard weaning food for infants. In sub-Saharan Africa, where it originated before spreading to the Indian subcontinent, it is still grown as a drought-tolerant staple in Uganda, Ethiopia, and Tanzania. The calcium in finger millet is plant-based, non-heme calcium. Its absorption rate is influenced by factors including vitamin C intake, gut health, and preparation method. Traditional fermentation of ragi, a practice embedded in South Indian food culture, has been shown to reduce phytic acid content, which can otherwise inhibit mineral absorption. This is ancestral nutritional knowledge that modern biochemistry has since confirmed. Beyond calcium, finger millet contains meaningful iron, is naturally gluten-free, and has a moderate glycemic index that compares favorably to polished rice. Ragi mudde, steamed finger millet balls, paired with a lentil stew is one of the most nutritionally complete traditional meals in South Indian cuisine. If you grow one grain from this list, make it this one.
6. Sorghum, the ancient power grain. Sorghum has one of the most impressive agricultural biographies of any food crop on Earth. Sorghum by color was domesticated in northeastern Africa, likely in the region of modern Ethiopia and Sudan, approximately 8,000 years ago. For millennia, sorghum was one of the most important caloric crops, sustaining populations across multiple continents. It remains the 5th most important cereal crop globally by production volume today. The reason for its remarkable geographic spread is the same reason it mattered historically. Sorghum is extraordinarily drought-resistant. It has one of the deepest root systems of any cereal, allowing it to access water unavailable to shallower-rooted crops. In environments where rainfall is unpredictable and soils are thin, sorghum provides food security that few other crops can match.
Nutritionally, sorghum is naturally gluten-free and provides a solid mineral profile. It is a meaningful source of phosphorus, magnesium, iron, and zinc. It also contains tannins and phenolic compounds that act as antioxidants in the body. Sorghum is also notably high in dietary fiber, particularly resistant starch, which feeds beneficial gut bacteria and is associated with reduced systemic inflammation. Whole grain sorghum can be cooked as a grain, similar to wheat berries, popped like popcorn, ground into flour for flatbreads, or fermented into traditional porridges and beverages. It is versatile, and it has fed more people across more centuries than almost any other grain.
Number 7. Amaranth, the grain of the Aztecs. Amaranth is not technically a grain. It is a pseudo-cereal, more closely related to beets and spinach than to wheat or rice. But its seeds are processed and eaten exactly like grain, and nutritionally it outperforms many true cereals in ways that make it remarkable. Amaranth was a central food crop of Mesoamerican civilizations, particularly the Aztec, for whom it was so culturally and spiritually significant that the Spanish colonial authorities, upon conquering the region in the early 16th century, banned its cultivation. Today, it has reemerged globally as one of the most nutritionally studied pseudo-cereals. The protein content of amaranth seeds is approximately 14 to 17% by dry weight, higher than most true cereals. Multiple studies confirm amaranth's favorable essential amino acid composition relative to most cereals. Amaranth seeds also provide calcium, approximately 159 milligrams per 100 grams raw, magnesium, iron, and phosphorus. Both the seeds and the leaves are edible. The leaves have their own nutritional profile worth exploring. Amaranth seeds can be popped like tiny popcorn, cooked as a grain porridge, or ground into gluten-free flour. The popped seeds have a delightful, slightly nutty crunch and can be eaten as a snack or added to yogurt. This is one of the most nutritionally dense plants humans have ever cultivated, with a history worth understanding.
8. Kodo Millet, the survivor crop. Kodo millet is the quiet member of the millet family. Kodo millet grows in waterlogged, poorly drained soils that would destroy most other crops. It tolerates acidic soils, heat stress, and drought periods. In traditional Indian agriculture, it served communities in the Deccan Plateau and tribal regions as a backup crop. In Sanskrit texts, it appears under the name Kodrava, referenced as a medicinal food recommended during illness and recovery. One important note about Kodo millet: it can occasionally accumulate mycotoxins if stored improperly or harvested from flooded fields, where improper preparation was associated with digestive discomfort. Proper cleaning, soaking, and thorough cooking removes this concern. Traditional preparation always included soaking and sun-drying before cooking, practices that modern food science has confirmed reduce problematic compound concentrations. Nutritionally, Kodo millet provides dietary fiber, iron, calcium, and B vitamins. Its fiber content is particularly high, and it is naturally gluten-free. Cook it as you would rice, a 1:2 ratio with water. Simmer for 20 minutes. It has a mild, slightly earthy flavor that pairs well with spiced lentils or vegetable curries. It deserves a place in any exploration of the millet family.
Number 9. Einkorn, the original wheat. Every wheat on Earth traces its lineage, at least in part, to this grain. Einkorn was domesticated approximately 10,000 years ago in the Karakada mountain region of what is now southeastern Turkey. It is the most genetically primitive cultivated wheat in existence. Studies comparing einkorn to modern bread wheat consistently find higher concentrations of zinc, iron, manganese, and other trace minerals in einkorn. Its protein content reaches 19 to 21% in some organically grown varieties, well above modern wheat's 10 to 13% range. It is also notably higher in lutein, a carotenoid with antioxidant properties, giving einkorn flour its characteristic golden color. Zinc is worth emphasizing here. Zinc functions as a cofactor in dozens of enzymatic reactions, including those involved in bone cell activity. Zinc deficiency is common globally and is associated in the research literature with impaired bone formation and immune function. Einkorn does contain gluten and is not appropriate for people with celiac disease. This is an important caveat that must be stated clearly. Its gluten structure is different from modern wheat, and some people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity report tolerating it better, but this is individual and not a clinical guarantee. Einkorn flour can be used in flatbreads, porridges, and pasta. It has a rich, buttery flavor, more pronounced than modern wheat. It stores well as whole berries and grinds into flour when needed. This is wheat as it existed before 10,000 years of selection pressure changed it. It is worth experiencing.
Number 10. Emmer, the Pharaoh's grain. If einkorn is the origin point of wheat, Emmer is where wheat civilization began to scale. Emmer was the dominant grain of ancient Egyptian agriculture for thousands of years. It was the grain used to bake the bread that fed pyramid construction workers, as confirmed by archaeobotanical analysis of grain residues at construction sites near Giza. It appears in tomb paintings, in grain storage hieroglyphs, and in offerings to the dead. It spread westward across the Mediterranean as Greek and Roman agricultural systems expanded. The Roman far, a grain used in ritual offerings and early unleavened breads, was emmer wheat. From Italy to the Fertile Crescent, emmer was the bread grain of the ancient world for millennia before modern wheat varieties displaced it in the 20th century. Emmer has a higher protein content than modern bread wheat, typically in the 15 to 17% range depending on growing conditions. Like einkorn, emmer retains the bran and germ layers through its whole structure in ways that industrial milling of modern wheat cannot replicate. Emmer does contain gluten, again, not appropriate for celiac disease. It is available as whole berries that cook into a satisfying, chewy grain, excellent in soups, grain salads, and slow-cooked stews. It also makes a dense, flavorful flour. This is the grain that built one of history's greatest civilizations. It deserves a place in your pantry.
Number 11, Teff. Tiny seeds, giant legacy. Teff is the smallest grain in the world. A single seed is barely 1 millimeter in diameter, roughly the size of a poppy seed. And because of their size, the germ and bran cannot be separated from the endosperm during milling, which means that Teff flour, unlike most processed grains, retains the full nutritional package of the whole grain in every form it's consumed. Teff has been cultivated in the Ethiopian highlands for an estimated 3,000 years. It is the grain from which injera is made, the large, spongy, slightly sour flatbread that serves as both plate and utensil in Ethiopian cuisine. Injera is made through a multi-day fermentation process, which has important nutritional consequences. Fermentation substantially increases the bioavailability of Teff's minerals by reducing phytic acid content, the same mechanism seen in traditional Ragi preparation. The nutritional profile of Teff is remarkable. Per 100 grams of whole grain, Teff provides approximately 180 milligrams of calcium, higher than most other grains outside of finger millet. It is naturally gluten-free. It contains all 9 essential amino acids, including lysine, making it a nutritionally complete protein source for our grain. Iron deserves a moment here. Iron is essential not just for oxygen transport in the blood, it is a required cofactor in the enzymatic production of collagen, the protein that forms the structural matrix of bone. Without adequate iron, collagen synthesis is impaired and bone quality suffers. Teff's iron content is among the highest of any whole grain. Traditional injera is a 3-day fermentation preparation, but Teff can also be cooked as a simple porridge in 20 minutes. It has a mild, slightly earthy, malty flavor. Explore it. This is one of the most nutritionally significant grains in the world, and most people outside of Ethiopia have never eaten it.
12. Buckwheat, the pseudograin warrior. Buckwheat is one of the more satisfying entries on this list because it involves a fundamental misconception built into its name. Buckwheat is not wheat. It is not even a grass. It is a flowering plant in the Polygonaceae family, more closely related to sorrel and rhubarb than to any cereal grain. It is a pseudo-cereal, like Amaranth and Quinoa, whose seeds happen to be processed and eaten like grains, and it is naturally completely gluten-free. Buckwheat has been cultivated for approximately 6,000 years, originating in the highland regions of Tibet and southwestern China. In Japan, it is the basis of soba noodles, a culinary tradition dating back centuries. It is a good source of magnesium, manganese, copper, and phosphorus. Phosphorus is a major structural component of the mineral matrix of bone itself. The minerals in buckwheat are considered particularly bioavailable because buckwheat has a relatively low phytic acid content compared to other grain family foods, meaning the minerals are less bound and more accessible during digestion. A grain that delivers minerals in an absorbable form is more nutritionally valuable than one that delivers them bound and inaccessible. Cook buckwheat groats as a porridge, roast them for kasha, or use buckwheat flour in pancakes and flatbreads. Fast-growing, frost-tolerant, and easy to cultivate in a home garden, this is one of the most practical crops on this list. 13. Quinoa, the grain of the Andes. Quinoa is probably the most recognized name on this list for Western audiences, but its cultural and historical depth is often underappreciated in the context of its modern marketing. Chenopodium quinoa is another pseudo-cereal, a flowering plant whose seeds are processed as grain. For the Inca civilization, quinoa was one of the 3 foundational food crops alongside maize and potatoes. It was called mother grain, and planting ceremonies involved the Inca emperor personally sowing the first seeds with a golden tool. Quinoa is grown primarily at altitudes between 2,500 and 4,000 meters above sea level, conditions that would destroy most other food crops. The extreme UV radiation, thin air, temperature fluctuations, and thin rocky soils of the Andes required a crop of exceptional hardiness. Its protein content of approximately 14 to 16 grams per 100 grams is high for a plant food. All 9 essential amino acids are present in proportions that meet human dietary requirements. This is exceptional for a plant-based food. Quinoa provides significant magnesium, phosphorus, iron, and zinc. Magnesium and phosphorus are directly involved in bone mineral metabolism. One preparation note: quinoa contains saponins on its outer coating that can create a bitter, soapy taste if not removed. Rinse whole quinoa seeds thoroughly under cold water before cooking. This also partially reduces saponin content, which can irritate sensitive digestive systems in some individuals. Cook it like rice. Eat it warm as a grain dole base, cold in salads, or as a hot porridge with fruit and nuts. This is one of the most nutritionally complete plant foods cultivated by human civilization.
14. Oats, the strength builder. Oats have an unfashionable reputation in some food culture circles. They're familiar, ordinary, breakfast food. That familiarity is worth reconsidering. Avena sativa was domesticated much later than most grains on this list, probably around 3,000 years ago in the Fertile Crescent region. But it spread rapidly through Europe, where its cold tolerance made it invaluable in climates inhospitable to wheat. Oats are the primary dietary source of a specific type of soluble fiber called beta-glucan. Beta-glucan forms a gel-like substance in the digestive tract that has been studied extensively for its effects on cholesterol, blood glucose regulation, and gut microbiome health. They are a complete enough protein source for a cereal, though not exceptional in this regard compared to amaranth or quinoa. Importantly, oats are technically gluten-free, but they are commonly cross-contaminated with wheat during growing, harvesting, or processing. People with celiac disease should use certified gluten-free oats only. Prepare oats as overnight oats soaked in water or non-dairy milk, cooked as porridge, or baked into savory flatbreads. This grain is not glamorous. It is simply reliable, nutritionally solid, and deeply embedded in the history of physical labor cultures across Northern Europe. It earned its reputation honestly.
Number 15. African pearl millet, the desert titan. We end where the story of food security circles back to its most urgent point. African pearl millet, also called bajra in South Asia, is one of the oldest and most important cereal crops in human history. It was domesticated in the Sahel region of West Africa approximately 5,000 years ago. Pearl millet survived where the climate was becoming increasingly hostile to agriculture. It produced food in places that were becoming uninhabitable for other crops. Today, pearl millet is the primary food grain for approximately 90 million people across the semi-arid tropics, across the Sahel, West Africa, India, and Pakistan. It grows in temperatures exceeding 40 degrees Celsius. It tolerates sandy, low-nutrient soils. It requires minimal water. The nutritional profile of pearl millet is substantial. It contains approximately 42 milligrams of calcium per 100 grams, lower than finger millet, but respectable among the millet family. It provides meaningful amounts of iron, phosphorus, magnesium, and zinc. It is particularly notable for its protein content, approximately 11 to 12 grams per 100 grams, and for a relatively favorable essential amino acid profile compared to other millets. Iron is worth returning to here at the close of the list. Iron deficiency is the most prevalent nutritional deficiency globally, affecting over 2 billion people by WHO estimates. Physical strength, muscular endurance, and skeletal integrity are all undermined by iron deficiency anemia. Pearl millet's iron density makes it genuinely relevant to populations where animal source iron is limited. Pearl millet flour makes exceptional flatbreads. The traditional Indian bajra roti, thick, smoky, and satisfying, eaten with mustard greens and yogurt, is one of the nutritionally complete meals of the subcontinent. It can also be cooked as a porridge, fermented into traditional beverages, or popped like sorghum. This is the grain that refused to surrender to climate, that fed people in places where other crops could not follow. It is a remarkable plant, and it is a fitting place to end.
Let me give you a framework for everything we've covered. 15 ancient grains, 5 categories of nutritional contribution to skeletal and muscular health. Grains richest in mineral density for bone support. Finger millet leads with its calcium content. Teff follows with calcium, iron, and magnesium. Amaranth and quinoa provide significant magnesium, phosphorus, and zinc. Pearl millet adds meaningful iron. Grains with the strongest protein and amino acid profiles. Amaranth and quinoa deliver complete essential amino acid profiles that approach animal protein quality. Einkorn and emmer provide higher protein than modern wheat. Grains with the most bioavailable minerals. Buckwheat's low phytic acid content makes its minerals particularly accessible. Traditional fermentation of teff and finger millet, the methods used in injera and ragi preparations for millennia, substantially improves mineral bioavailability. Grains with the most relevant anti-inflammatory profiles. Sorghum's phenolic compounds, buckwheat's rutin, and the fiber fractions in oats, barnyard millet, and proso millet are all associated in the research literature with reduced markers of systemic inflammation, a genuine long-term factor in skeletal health. Grains of greatest agricultural resilience. Pearl millet, proso millet, barnyard millet, sorghum, and fonio represent crops that produce food in conditions that would destroy modern staples. A starter approach for anyone new to these grains: begin with finger millet and buckwheat as your first two, because they represent the clearest mineral density story and are the most practical to source and cook. Add amaranth for its protein profile. Incorporate teff once you're comfortable with fermented grain preparations. No single grain replaces a diverse diet. What this list represents is a return to the extraordinary nutritional breadth that traditional food cultures accessed before the narrowing of the modern agricultural system to a handful of commodity crops. These grains will be here after we're gone. The question is whether we choose to learn from them.
If you made it this far, thank you. Drop a comment below and tell me which seed you'd never heard of before today. I read every single one. And if this video changed the way you think about the history of food and what plants can do, please share it with someone. It's the most direct way to help this channel grow. Subscribe if you haven't. Hit the bell. I'll see you in the next one.